"Who do you think you are, questioning me like that?" the older man snapped, his voice sharp and indignant. But I didn't flinch. I held my gaze steady and answered, "Mr. Ingwen," I said calmly, "I'm here to help you. But if you want that help, I need the full story, every detail." He exhaled sharply, clearly wounded in his pride, but said nothing more. For a moment he looked away, shaking his head. "My name is Danielle," I finally said, the name I had chosen for myself when I was a child. "I'm 30 years old now, an attorney. I never used my family's last name. I built a new identity, one rooted in resilience. Every painful memory from my past, I turned into motivation, to survive, to succeed, to stand tall in a world that once tried to break me. When I was 6 years old, my parents left me at an orphanage. Just like that, no explanation, no goodbye that meant anything. They walked away without a second glance, leaving me confused and heartbroken, trying to understand what I'd done wrong. Was I not enough? Was I too much? And now, decades later, those same people who discarded me are sitting across from me in my office, asking for legal help. And they have no idea who I am. The last time I saw them, my mother had dressed me in my nicest outfit, a little yellow dress with white daisies. She told me we were going somewhere special. I remember gripping her hand tightly as we walked into the orphanage. The bright sunlight outside faded into the dim, sterile hallways inside. It smelled of cleaning supplies, and something else I couldn't name. Something cold. Something like emptiness. She knelt in front of me, brushing a strand of hair away from my face. "You'll love it here," she said, her voice soft but strangely hollow. "They'll take such good care of you." I didn't understand. "When are you coming back?" I asked, my small hands clinging to hers. She hesitated. Her eyes darted away before she forced a smile. "Soon, sweetheart. Be good, okay?" I didn't cry when she left. I just stood there, staring at the door, waiting for it to open again. Never did. Hours passed. Then days. That's when I understood, she wasn't coming back. That was the day I learned what it meant to be truly alone. The orphanage became my world. And survival in that world meant learning to be tough. I stopped asking questions about why they left. No one had answers, not the caretakers, not the other kids. Instead, I threw myself into what I could control, my studies. Books became my refuge. I'd lose myself in their pages, escaping to places far from the cold, gray walls of the orphanage. I made a promise to myself. I would become smarter, stronger, better than anyone who ever thought I wasn't worth keeping. But the nights were the hardest. Alone in my bunk, staring up at the ceiling, I'd wonder what I had done wrong. Did I cry too much? Was I too quiet? Too loud? Not helpful enough? Each unanswered question became fuel. Fuel for the fire that burned inside me, the one that said, "Prove them wrong. Prove to yourself that you are enough." Somehow, someday I would show them. I would show the world. Years later, I finally learned the truth. I was about 10 when Mrs. Patel, the orphanage director, a kind, overworked woman who always looked at me with a certain sadness, called me into her small, cluttered office. She'd been there the day my parents left me and had always treated me a little differently. "Danielle," she said gently, motioning for me to sit, "you're old enough now to know why your parents brought you here." Her voice was kind, but her words cut deep. "Your parents came from a very traditional background," she explained. "When your little brother was born, they believed it was their duty to give him everything. Their time, their resources, their future. To them, he was the heir." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "But I'm their daughter," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Why didn't they want me to?" Mrs. Patel's eyes filled with sympathy. "It's not because of anything you did, sweetheart. It was never about you. It was about them and their beliefs. Their twisted idea of what was expected of them. And it was wrong. So very wrong." That night, lying in bed, the truth hit me like a wave. They hadn't left because of something I did. They left because of who I was, a girl. A girl who, in their eyes, wasn't worth keeping. After that, something in me changed. I stopped asking why. I stopped looking back. focused on moving forward. I let the pain fuel my ambition. At school, I gave everything I had to my studies. I stayed late in the library, devouring books that transported me to worlds where anything was possible. By 16, I was winning academic competitions and gaining the respect of teachers who saw what I could become. One teacher told me, "Danielle, you could go far. You just need the right opportunities." That one sentence planted a seed of hope. I started applying for scholarships with a single goal in mind: get into a good university. Prove that I could rise above where I came from. When the acceptance letter arrived from a top school, I held it like it was a golden ticket. It wasn't just a chance to study, it was my way out. The orphanage threw a small party for me. Mrs. Patel hugged me tightly. "You've earned this, Danielle," she whispered. "Now go show the world what you can do." College was a whirlwind. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who believed in me, or at least saw my potential. My professors noticed my drive. My peers respected my focus. I grabbed every opportunity: internships, leadership roles, study groups that pushed me to my limits. Law school followed. It was grueling, but I thrived on the pressure. I learned how to channel my emotions into my work, how to connect with real people and real stories. I understood what it felt like to be powerless, and I wanted to help others who felt the same. By the time I graduated, I had offers from some of the best firms in the country. But I chose a firm in New York, one that focused on serving underserved communities. Felt right. I wanted to make a difference, not just a name for myself. All along I kept my past to myself, not out of shame but because I wanted to be seen for who I am now. Not the girl who was left behind, but the woman who rose. Every step I took forward felt like a quiet victory. A whisper to the little girl I once was, reminding her that she had grown into someone she could be proud of. It was during my second year at the firm when I met Mark. He was one of the attorneys assigned to a joint case, a complicated situation involving housing rights. At first, he was just another name in a long list of professionals. But as the weeks passed, I started to notice the warmth in his eyes and his quick, sincere sense of humor. He had a way of easing the tension in even the most stressful moments. Our connection wasn't instant. It grew slowly without any big declarations. Late nights at the office turned into shared dinners, and our casual talks about work began to drift into deeper conversations about life, dreams, and fears. I was cautious. I had spent so many years building walls around my heart that letting someone in felt like exposing a wound. But Mark never pushed. He gave me space, and over time I found myself wanting to open that space to him. One night, after we'd successfully closed the case, he walked me home. We stood at my apartment door, and he looked at me with a kind of understanding that caught me off guard. "You're the most driven person I've ever met," he said. "But sometimes, it's okay to let someone else carry a bit of that weight." His words stayed with me long after he walked away. And for the first time in years, I let myself believe I didn't have to do it all alone. As our relationship grew stronger, our conversations turned toward the future, where we wanted to be in 5 or 10 years, whether we saw kids in the picture. For so long I had avoided thinking about family. The very idea of becoming a parent terrified me, not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid of repeating the mistakes my own parents had made. But with Mark, that fear started to soften. He wanted children, and so did I. But dreaming was the easy part. Turning dreams into reality came with hard choices. Between student loans, rent, and the cost of living in New York, our finances were tight. We both worked long hours, and the thought of starting a family made the financial strain feel heavier. Mark remained calm and supportive, always reminding me that we were in this together. "We'll figure it out," he told me one night, as we sat at our tiny kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets and takeout containers. But I couldn't shake the sense that I needed to do more, to push harder, to build a future where we wouldn't just be surviving but thriving. I loved the work I was doing, helping people who felt powerless, using the law to advocate for those who had no one else. Gave me purpose. But it didn't give me stability. And as much as my heart was tied to the mission, my mind couldn't ignore the reality forever. One evening, while reviewing a stack of new case files, I felt it. Something had to give. I had spent years carving out a place for myself in public interest law. But the more I thought about our future, the more I realized I needed to make a change. That night, over a quiet dinner, I looked at Mark and said, "I've been thinking about applying to some bigger firms. Maybe even corporate law." I was nervous. The words felt like a betrayal of everything I had built. But Mark didn't flinch. "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "I know how much you love what you're doing now." "I do," I said honestly. "But it's not enough. If we want to start a family someday, we need to plan for that. I want to give our kids the kind of security I never had." He reached across the table and took my hand. "If it's what you want, I'm with you. I know you'll succeed anywhere." As I updated my resume and researched firms, an old thought began to resurface, one I had buried years ago. My family. The ones who had abandoned me. I told myself I didn't need them, that I was better off not knowing. But now, on the edge of creating a family of my own, I found myself wondering, who were they really? What kind of life had they built without me? All I had were fragments, bits of stories, scattered memories. I remembered Mrs. Patel once telling me they were wealthy, prominent. The idea had always stung. They didn't leave me because they couldn't raise me. They left me because they didn't want to. That bitterness never fully faded. But now, curiosity was growing stronger than the pain. The next day I called the orphanage. Mrs. Patel had retired, but the new director, a woman named Claire, was kind and open. "We still have some of your records," she said. "Why don't you come by? Maybe we can talk through what you're looking for." I agreed. My stomach twisted with nerves as I hung up. A few days later, I walked back through the gates of the orphanage. The worn brick walls and the distant sound of children's laughter pulled me into the past. Claire welcomed me with a warm smile and led me to her office. "I pulled some files I thought might help," she said, setting a thin folder on the desk. My hands trembled as I opened it. Pages filled with handwritten notes and old admission forms stared back at me. "Your parents," Claire began gently. "They came from a very well-off family. From what I could gather, they owned several businesses and held a strong position in their community." I nodded, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. It confirmed what I had always suspected, but hearing it still hurt. "Do you have anything else?" I asked, my voice steady but tense. Claire hesitated, then slid a photocopy of a newspaper article across the desk. It was a feature story on the Yuan family. My family. The article celebrated their booming company, their community involvement, their perfect, polished life. And there they were in the photo. My parents, older now but unmistakable, standing proudly next to a young man I instantly recognized as my brother. They looked complete, whole, like I had never existed. When I left the orphanage that day, I felt split in two. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers. But another part whispered, "Let it go." What good would it do to dig up what was already buried? They had made their choice, and I had made mine. I tucked the folder away at home and tried to focus on what mattered. The future. Weeks later, my hard work paid off. I received an offer from one of the top corporate law firms in the country. The job came with everything I'd hoped for. Stability, prestige, a salary that could finally support the life Mark and I envisioned. When I told him, his eyes lit up with pride. "I knew you'd get it," he said, pulling me into a hug. "You deserve this, Danielle." I threw myself into the new role. The pressure was intense, but I thrived on it. The long hours, the high-stakes clients, it pushed me and I pushed right back. With Mia, our daughter, now in the picture, everything shifted again. She was a tiny, perfect burst of joy who changed our lives in the best way. Motherhood unlocked something in me I didn't even know was there. I wanted to give her everything I never had. Love, stability, certainty that she was wanted. And despite the stress, my career flourished. I became one of the youngest senior attorneys at the firm, known for my precision and determination. Mark was my anchor, always stepping in when I needed to stay late or prep for a big case. We were living the life we dreamed of, built on love, respect, and teamwork. But sometimes in the quiet moments, rocking Mia to sleep, watching her little chest rise and fall, I'd think of the people who once left me behind. And I'd wonder how anyone could walk away from something so precious. I pushed the thoughts away. It doesn't matter anymore, I'd tell myself. I have my family now. The one that matters. Then one morning everything shifted again. I walked into the office, coffee in hand, ready for another full day of meetings. My assistant knocked lightly on the door just as I sat down. "Danielle," she said with a smile, "Mr. Roberts wants to see you. It's about a new client." I straightened my blazer and headed to his office, curiosity piqued. New clients were always a thrill, and I'd become the go-to for sensitive, high-stakes cases. "Good morning, Danielle," Mr. Roberts said, leaning back in his chair. "We've taken on a significant new client. The case is complicated. Financial mismanagement, lawsuits, potential bankruptcy. It's high profile but discreet. I think you're the perfect fit." He slid a folder across the desk. "This one's yours." I picked it up and opened the cover. My heart stopped. Ewan Holdings. My parents' company. My breath caught in my throat. The name glared back at me like a ghost from the past. All at once, the memories of the orphanage and that faded newspaper article rushed in like a wave. I looked up at Mr. Roberts, fighting to keep my expression neutral. "Thank you," I said evenly. "I'll get started right away." Back in my office, I closed the door behind me and sat down slowly. My fingers clutched the file like it might vanish if I let it go. Inside, a storm was brewing. Anger, confusion, curiosity, all swirling together in a way that left me breathless. I stared down at the name on the folder. Ewan Holdings. My parents' company. And for the longest time I didn't move. I just sat there. Caught between instinct and everything that had brought me here, I stared at the file, torn. Part of me wanted to shove it into a drawer and pretend it never existed. Another part of me, stronger, more defiant, wanted to open it and examine every painful detail. How far had they fallen? What were the odds that after all these years, they'd end up in my office, needing my help? The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent my entire life trying to forget them, and now, here they were. Not in person, not yet, but on paper. Invading the life I had fought so hard to build on my own. After a long pause, I gave in. I opened the folder. If I was going to make a decision whether to take the case or walk away, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The first few pages were a financial horror story. Ewan Holdings was on the brink of bankruptcy, drowning in lawsuits from creditors, business partners, even former employees. Disaster. The kind that didn't happen overnight. It took years of neglect, arrogance, and mismanagement to land a company in this much trouble. And then, a familiar name appeared. Over and over again. Ewan. My brother. The golden child. The chosen one. The boy they kept while discarding me. Apparently, he had taken over the company a few years ago, and driven it straight into the ground. Poor investments, reckless spending, and inability to keep up with market changes. The business was collapsing under his leadership. Every line I read felt like a jab to the chest. I leaned back in my chair and let out a shaky breath. It was almost poetic. The same family who had cast me aside to protect him was now sinking because of him. And now, their only hope might be me. The one they left behind. That evening, I walked through the front door still clutching the folder like it might disappear if I let go. Mark was in the kitchen, gently bouncing Mia on his hip while stirring something on the stove. The smell of dinner usually comforted me, but that night, I felt too shaken to even notice. "You're home early," he said with a warm smile. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, placing the folder on the counter. "Not really," I said softly. "There's something I need to tell you." Mark immediately set Mia down in her playpen and turned to me, concern flashing across his face. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath and told him everything. The new client, the name on the file, and the history I had buried so long ago. As I spoke, his expression shifted from surprise to disbelief, and finally to quiet understanding. So let me get this straight, he said, his voice calm but steady. The family who abandoned you is now facing financial ruin, and their survival depends on you? Pretty much, I said, crossing my arms and leaning against the counter. It's surreal, isn't it? Mark shook his head slowly. What are you going to do? Are you actually considering taking the case? I ran a hand through my hair and sighed. I don't know yet, but I can't just ignore it. I think I need to meet with them. See what they're like now. Maybe that will help me figure it out. Mark nodded, folding his arms. That's fair. You've always faced things head-on. Just promise me one thing. What's that? I asked, meeting his steady gaze. Do what's best for you, he said. Not for them. Not for the past. You don't owe them anything, Danielle. If you decide to take this case, let it be on your terms. His words hit harder than I expected. I nodded quietly. I'll keep that in mind. The meeting's tomorrow, I added. After that, I'll decide. Mark walked over and wrapped his arms around me, grounding me like he always did. No matter what you choose, he whispered, I've got your back. The next morning I sat at my desk, staring at the phone like it might bite me. My assistant had already contacted UN Holdings to set up the meeting. They agreed almost immediately. All that was left now was to confirm the time. I picked up the receiver and dialed. My heart pounded in my chest. UN Holdings, how may I direct your call? A cheerful woman's voice answered. This is Danielle from Cross & Roberts, I replied, keeping my voice calm. I'm calling to confirm the meeting scheduled for tomorrow with Mr. Yuan. Of course, she chirped. Mr. Yuan and Mr. Ba Yuan will be there at 11 a.m. Does that work for you? At the sound of Ba's name, my grip on the phone tightened. Yes, that works perfectly. Thank you. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. My stomach churned. In less than 24 hours, I would be face to face with the very people who had once decided I wasn't worth keeping. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I tossed and turned, my mind looping through every possible outcome. What would I say? Would they recognize me? Would I even recognize them? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces from that old newspaper clipping. Older now, sure, but unmistakable. By the time my alarm went off, I felt like I hadn't slept at all. I got ready on autopilot. Sleek black suit, hair tied back in a neat bun. I needed to look composed, even if I felt like I was breaking apart inside. At 10:50 a.m., I walked into the conference room and gave myself one last mental pep talk. You've faced worse than this, Danielle. You can do this. At exactly 11 o'clock, the door opened. My father walked in first. Still tall, still proud, still carrying that unmistakable air of control. Behind him came Ba, sharper featured than in the photos, but every inch the favored son. Neither of them even glanced at me as they approached the table. Miss Danielle, thank you for meeting with us, my father said, extending his hand. His tone was polite, professional, and utterly empty of recognition. I shook his hand firmly, keeping my composure flawless. Of course, I replied. Please have a seat. They sat down and I opened the folder in front of me, flipping through the pages with practiced calm. Let's get right to it, I said, my voice cool. Based on what I've reviewed, UN Holdings is in serious financial distress. Years of mismanagement, reckless investments, and multiple lawsuits have left the company teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. I couldn't help myself. My father's jaw tightened. His face flushed with anger. I could see the pride and fury simmering just below the surface. Finally he snapped. Who do you think you are, questioning me like that? He barked, his voice echoing across the room. For a moment I just stared at him. Let the weight of his words sink in. He had no idea who I was. No idea that the woman sitting across from him was the same little girl he had deemed unworthy all those years ago. The one he left behind. And now, here I was. His last shot at saving everything. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to scream. He didn't even recognize me. He couldn't see the woman I had become. The woman who now held the power to decide whether or not he got a second chance. So now I turn to you, the listener. What would you do? Would you confront him? Rip off the mask and make him see the truth? Would you take the case, show him the strength he never believed you had? Or would you walk away? Let him drown in the mess he and his golden child created. And there's one more thought I can't shake. Should I ruin them? Should I let everything they built crumble, and watch them feel the kind of pain they once forced me to endure? Is that justice? Or is that just revenge? Honestly, I don't know anymore. All I know is this: whatever I decide will change everything. So tell me, what would you do? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm still figuring out how this story ends, and maybe, just maybe, your perspective will help.